on that as well. And I'm sure that in a few moments the Liberals will have an opportunity to speak to this and respond to my comments. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent will have 4 minutes when the House returns to the debate on this motion.
By members, Déclaration de député, the Honourable Member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Key social determinants of health, like housing, education, infrastructure, health services, and food security, play a significant role in the well-being and quality of life of Canadians. Unfortunately, access to these factors is not the same across Canada, and anyone that has been to my riding has seen this firsthand. The WHO has stated that social determinants of health are shaped by the distribution of money, power, and resources. I have stressed several times in this House that the per capita system fails the government of Nunavut and Nunavut. While touring my riding, many Inuit have said that they feel forgotten. They believe new Canadians get treated better than they do. Mr. Speaker, it's time to change the per capita system to more of a needs-based approach. It's time to address these inequities and work to ensure that Inuit can enjoy the same quality of life as other Canadians. Mr. Speaker, Nunavut are hopeful that the language used thus far hasn't been just talk. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an honour to rise and share with the House the important work Equal Opportunities West is doing to assist persons with disabilities to secure meaningful employment. Their staff is dedicated to making sure each individual in their program is given the opportunity to succeed, and I'm proud to support their efforts in the community. Earlier this month, Equal Opportunities West received $450,000 from Western Economic Diversification to help entrepreneurs with disabilities succeed and thrive. Lastly, I want to share that I will host my second annual community barbecue and e-waste drive in support of Equal Opportunities West. In 2017, we were able to collect over 3,500 kilograms of e-waste, and we're looking forward to topping that number this year. I encourage everyone in Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley to stop by on June 9th, drop off their e-waste, pick up a hot dog, and say hi to the amazing staff, volunteers, and participants at Equal Opportunities West. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton, Riverbend.
Mr. Speaker, this government's omnibus justice bill, Bill C-75, misses the mark completely. This bill is an attempt by government falling behind in the polls to pass legislation in order to keep promises they've been failing to uphold. Bill C-75 is a huge overstep by this government. I think it is incredibly important to protect the rights and freedoms of Canadians, but this goes above and beyond. Under the proposed legislation, a number of serious offences, including child abduction, will be classified as hybrid offences. This means potentially lighter sentences for people accused of these serious crimes. Reducing these sentences will be a grave mistake. I'm not confident in the ability of this government to overhaul the justice system when they can't even appoint judges on time, creating a backlog that allows criminals to walk free after long court delays. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-75 is another attempt by this government to parade their social justice agenda while jeopardizing the safety of Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Brampton North.
Mr. Speaker, last week was a good week for Brampton. Minister Hunter and Minister Mully from the Ontario government, along with Mayor Jeffrey and Brampton City Council, announced the much-anticipated location of Brampton's future university in collaboration with Ryerson University and Sheridan College. Soon to be located in the heart of the city, just off Main Street, this new university will rejuvenate the downtown core, support local small businesses, and revamp the city's cultural scene. It will be situated steps away from the downtown Brampton GO and transit terminal. I'm excited to see that significant investments from the federal government has been making into my city. For example, the Riverwalk and major funds for public transit, which will work in conjunction with this university to breathe new life into the Brampton's downtown core. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to continue advocating for federal involvement in this project and others because this university will be a game changer.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, on September 15, 1915, the Minister of the Interior of the Ottoman Empire sent the following telegram to the Aleppo station. The government has decided to destroy all Armenians residing in Turkey. Their existence must be ended no matter how criminal the measures are that will be used. Neither age nor gender must be considered. Conscientious scruples have no place here. This was horrifying and crystal clear, and the horrors began in what became the first genocide of the 20th century. 1.5 million men, women, and children were massacred, executed, or moved to desert regions where they died. This House recognized this genocide in 2004, and the Government of Canada did the same 2 years later. More than a century later, we still have a duty to remember. We owe it to victims, but we also owe it to humanity to face past atrocities in order to ensure that they never happen again. Together, let us build a world of respect, tolerance, and peace.
Honourable Member for Quebec, Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to highlight an event coming up in my riding in Saint-André, Grand Falls area.
We'll bring together various economic stakeholders in an effort to support Dr. Oker's employees during their difficult transition period due to the unfortunate closure of their Grand Falls facility. Je tiens à remercier
I wish to extend a thank you to the Valley Chamber of Commerce on their efforts to put together a working group involving municipal representatives from the 4 major communities in this area, as well as business and provincial representatives, to educate constituents on resources for retraining and job opportunities available to them with employers in the region who plan to be present at the upcoming job fair.
The office looks forward to being present at the event and providing constituents with any federal resources they may need alongside representatives from Service Canada. Job creation and growth in the economy are a priority not just only in our government, but for the provincial government, and I commend the local Chamber of Commerce for spearheading this event.
Honourable Member for Edmonton Manning.
Mr. Speaker, as we saw yesterday in Toronto, our world is faced with tragedy on a daily basis. My thoughts go to the victims and their families of this horrific act, and I wish a speedy recovery to those injured in this attack. April is Organ and Tissue Donation Awareness Month. In the wake of the horrible tragedy that occurred in Humboldt, Saskatchewan, I have been deeply encouraged by the outpouring of support we have seen for organ and tissue donation thanks to Logan Boulet's Selfless Act. The life saved due to Boulet's generosity stands as a testament to the good that organ donation can do. I also believe that the federal government has a role to play in providing coordination between the provinces. This is a national issue that needs a national solution with a national organ donor registry. Mr. Speaker, in honor of the Humboldt Broncos and the victims of attack yesterday in Toronto, I encourage all Canadians to register to be a donor. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Marc-Aurèle-Fortin. Mr. Speaker, April 22nd was the 10th anniversary of the race held by the Champfleury Residents Association, a key organization in my riding. They are the flag bearers for sport and recreation in their community, and their goals serve in large part the needs of young families. Promoting a healthy environment and a healthy lifestyle is the mission of the Champfleury Residents Association. This race brings together families, neighbors, and friends from Laval, but also from the North Shore and Montreal, and it is becoming more and more popular, with 1,500 racers registered this time. I have followed their successes over time, and I am proud to encourage them in their future endeavors, even more so because of the fact that they are environmentally responsible. The Champfleury Residents Association is a young, dynamic, and effervescent group of young
Saga Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, with profound sadness, I pay tribute to Mary Elizabeth Needham, a constituent of my riding who passed away earlier this year. A graduate of the Ontario Ladies College, McGill, and the University of Toronto, Mary was accomplished, selfless, and compassionate. Mary was committed to improving the lives of vulnerable people and a strong proponent of social justice. She was an active member of the Unitarian congregation in my community and cared deeply about children's and women's issues. As a grandmother, Mary worked tirelessly through the Stephen Lewis Foundation's Grandmother to Grandmother campaign which supports grandmothers in Africa who are single-handedly raising orphan children. Mary's steadfast devotion to improving the well-being of others was an inspiration to those whose lives she touched along her path. She truly left an indelible mark in our community and around the world, and she is sorely missed. But for all those who knew her, Mr. Speaker, Mary's legacy will live on as we strive to help the least advantaged among us and work towards a better tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, beginning on April 24, 1915, the Armenian people were subjected to suffering and death at the hands of the Ottoman Empire, a tragic event in history that our Parliament in 2004 and our Conservative government in 2006 recognized as the Armenian Genocide. On Sunday, I joined the Armenian community in Waterloo Region to reflect on the suffering endured by thousands of Armenians and the 1.5 million whose lives were lost in the first genocide of the 20th century. Today, hundreds of thousands of Armenians will gather in Yerevan to commemorate the genocide. As a member and former chair of the Canada-Armenia Parliamentary Friendship Group, I have been honored to travel to Armenia and to witness the prosperous democracy that has emerged. I've been privileged to meet Canadians of Armenian descent who contributed so much to my home community of Waterloo Region and to all of Canada. By remembering the Armenian genocide, we should all be motivated to everything in our power to ensure that such a terrible tragedy never happens again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bonavista, Burin, Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Barbara Pinney from Glovertown in my riding. Last week, Barbara received the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteerism from the Governor-General. Barbara has been a loyal and dedicated volunteer with the Canadian Red Cross for more than 40 years. Her commitment to the Red Cross has transcended local, regional, national, and international levels. Barbara's involvement with the Red Cross began as a junior Red Cross volunteer, and in 1975 she became a teacher sponsor, a role which she continued in every school in her teaching career. She has been an active member ever since. Barbara Pinney is an inspiration to all Canadians. Her humble approach has created generations of youth who have grown to support the Red Cross at all ages. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Barbara Pinney for her service to the Canadian Red Cross and making our communities, province, country, and world a better place for all.
The honourable member for Hamilton East Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, the tragic event in Toronto has saddened us all. But we need to remember that there is so much goodness in our people that truly defines our nation. Recently, a taxi driver from my riding found in his car $4,000 cash in small bills. Tajamal Rana came to Canada about 16 years ago from Pakistan and has raised his family, his wife, and 3 young children on the wages of a cab driver. His first thought finding the money was, this money does not belong to me. I must return it. And he eventually traced the person and returned the money. When I learned of this, I asked him to my office, where in a brief ceremony I handed him a certificate, which says in part, you are to be commended for setting such a remarkable example of honesty and truthfulness in making our community a better place. Mr. Speaker, a humble Pakistani Canadian, Tajamal Rana, is a reminder to all of us of the decency of our people.
Bravo. The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, today I want to pay my respects to a special friend who lost her life last week after a 4-year battle with cancer. Donna Richardson was known to many of us on Parliament Hill as not only the wife of our former parliamentary colleague John Duncan, but for her dedicated work in the Senate and House. Many of us watched as Donna showed up to work almost every day while she underwent surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. Typically, she had a giant smile on her face, a laugh that would brighten the room, and a passion for politics. An entrepreneur, avid athlete, dedicated worker whose faith guided her throughout her life. Donna and John found each other later in life, but it was a match that was meant to be. Their time was too short, especially in their new home on the island. But we were all witness to the joy, love, and support their marriage provided through many challenges. I'd like to express our deepest condolences to John and Donna's family. Donna, you faced your illness with bravery and determination. You are now without pain. Rest in peace.
The honourable member for Vimy. Mr. Speaker, It is with a heavy heart that I rise again in this House to acknowledge the anniversary of the Armenian genocide that cost the lives of countless innocent people starting on the 24th of April 1915. I have had the honor of becoming close to the Armenian community in Vimy, Laval, and Montreal. They are a resolute and proud people, strong, and today we are reminded of their perseverance in the face of crushing obstacles and past atrocities. We recognize and condemn the Armenian genocide because we must not forget the injustices perpetrated on peoples if we want to continue moving forward together, hand in hand, towards a truly multicultural and fair society.
Today, remembering and commemorating the lost lives, but also celebrating the continued bonds we share with our Armenian brothers and sisters. Never again. Vach and Kamme Yavas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Les
This tragic attack in Toronto is cause for all Canadians to pause and remember the 10 lives that were taken and the 15 who were injured. Nos pensées vont vers...
Our thoughts are with the victims of this tragedy as well as with their families and their close ones. Know that you are not alone and that we are with you.
For the heroic work of first responders and those aiding the injured. Their courage and determination is the embodiment of the values Canadians hold dear. Constable Ken Lamb's bravery deserves special recognition. His restraint and calm in the face of chaos is an example of professionalism and courage. I have no doubt that this intervention will be held as an example for those training for the police forces. Nous ne laisserons pas cette attaque.
We will not let this attack spread fear or division amongst us.
Strong, diverse, loving and courageous. Nothing that happened yesterday will change that. We will come together, we will mourn, we will seek justice, and we will remain strong. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday a busy street in Toronto became the scene of a horrible crime. On a peaceful, sunny day in spring, we saw it marred by senseless brutality, taking the lives of 10 innocent people and sending many more to hospital.
Today, we are with those who lost their lives and their close ones, and our prayers are with the ones recovering in hospital.
Moments to inspire our faith in humanity. We have all by now seen how this cowardly attacker was confronted and subdued by a single brave Toronto police officer, exemplifying the best of Toronto's first responders. And it is but one of the many acts of selflessness of which we have learned, showing the bravery and kindness of Torontonians as they confronted a devastating act of murder on their streets. I'd also like to commend Mayor John Tory and the Toronto Police Services for their calm guidance in the midst of a shocking and chaotic situation. Toronto is a strong city, Mr. Speaker, and its residents will have our support as they rally together, not just in anger or grief, but in solidarity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Eglinton Lawrence.
Speaker, the people of my hometown of Toronto are grief-stricken today in the wake of a senseless, horrifying, and criminal act that took 10 innocent lives and left many more injured, shattering a peaceful city. Aux victimes et aux survivants.
To the victims and the survivors, and to those who lost their closed ones, know that all Canadians are with you. And to the residents of Toronto, you are honourable and generous, and we offer you all the support you need while you recover from this tragedy.
Founders, we are profoundly grateful for your service and courage. In the moment of truth, you stared down danger with professionalism and bravery that, without question, saved lives, prevented further injury, and kept our city safe. The day after, some might say that Toronto has lost its innocence. However, let me assure this House that we are proud, we are resilient, and we are strong. I hope all members will join me in expressing support and solidarity for the good people of Toronto, especially the mothers and fathers and spouses and children who lost someone they love. We are with you, and together we will emerge from this more united than ever.
All too soon, we find ourselves once again offering condolences on the tragic and unexpected loss of life many of our fellow citizens have had to bear. The families and friends of those women and men killed or injured in yesterday's attack have suffered the cruelest blow. Theirs is a deeply personal loss that can only be imagined by those of us who did not know their loved ones. Cependant,
and yet, I know that like all Canadians, we are all saddened and horrified by these events. At the same time, we are comforted by the courage and compassion of those who helped the victims.
Observe a moment of silence as an expression of our sorrow. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, last week the government of Quebec said that Ottawa's initial response to its request for help with the illegal border crossings demonstrated that the federal government has no idea what's going on at the border. The Federal Minister of Immigration replied by criticizing Quebec. Very impressive. It's only when Quebec went to the media that they were finally able to obtain assistance. Why would Quebec have to go to the media to finally get a reaction from this government? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since we came to power, we have been building bridges with the provincial premiers, with provincial governments, and with the municipalities. We believe in cooperation and collaboration that is open and transparent, and Canadians can see this in action in many files. When it comes to asylum seekers, I am very proud of the work that we are doing and that the advisory committee is doing with stakeholders from many different levels to ensure that we can really respond to this in a way that Canadians expect us to. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The number of illegal border crossings to Canada has increased 128% over the same time period last year. This has been an issue for well over a year, but this Prime Minister has failed to take any concrete steps to address the situation. In fact, it was the Prime Minister's own words that encouraged this crisis to start in the first place. So my question is, what was he doing that prevented him from addressing this crisis for a whole year?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our system needs to be compassionate and needs to ensure that only those who should be in Canada stay.
Conservatives who cut $390 million from the CPSA and cut refugee health care. They created massive backlogs and processing delays, which we're still working to fix. They want to know concrete actions. Well, we've invested $173 million, which include $74 million to ensure faster processing of claims. While Conservatives continue to vote against funding for our security agencies, we will make sure they have the resources they need.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we have no doubt that their plan is more expensive. Our problem is also that it's less effective.
That's right.
We're getting the worst of both worlds, a higher cost for a less effective border system. Now, according to an anonymous briefing from government officials reported by Global News, the plan to address the illegal migrant situation is still, quote, days or weeks away from being ready. This despite that this situation has been going on for over a year. Meanwhile, families here in Canada who are waiting to be reunited with a loved one or refugees facing real danger have to wait longer because of this government's inaction. Why?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think people will be forgiven for rolling their eyes when the Conservatives talk about supporting refugees or accelerating process for family reunification. Their cuts left us with significant backlogs. They tried to get rid of backlogs by using the delete button. Instead, we invested significantly in ensuring that we have a robust immigration system that is able to handle asylum seekers and irregular arrivals. We will continue to make sure that Canada is a strong and open country that applies the rules of its immigration system.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order.
Mr. Speaker, that is just so patently false. The reality is it is completely unfair and unjust to tell people who have waited years to come to Canada that their family members now have to wait longer just because some people want to jump the line. The Conservative government had a generous and welcoming immigration policy that was based on rules to ensure that legitimate refugees facing real danger and those waiting to be reunited with their families could do so. Why is this government prioritizing those who skip the line?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives cut funding for refugee and immigration processing. The Conservative government cut funding for refugee health care. And on top of that, this supposedly law and order party actually cut $400 million from the CPSA in their capacity to actually police and patrol our borders. Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from them. What we will do is continue to ensure the integrity of our immigration system, of our refugee system, and of our borders.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's no surprise that a government that has an $18 billion deficit has the only metric for success being how much money they're spending. The reality is that their system is broken. They are forcing people who want to come to Canada the right way to wait even longer as they prioritize those who are skipping the line. Why are they doing nothing after this situation has been building up for over a year?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the families that have been waiting for years are waiting for years largely because of the cuts in processing, the cuts in immigration services that the previous Harper government brought in, that they are continuing to double down on. We have made significant investments of hundreds of millions of dollars in improving our immigration processing times, accelerating family reunification, all the while ensuring that we live up to our international commitments to treat asylum seekers with the rules-based approach that they need to have.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Neigette, Témiscouata-Basque.
Mr. Speaker, we now have a media report claiming that the process to approve Kinder Morgan was rigged following lobbying from the Texas Oil Company. Government officials said that after the Resources Minister met with Kinder Morgan, the government rushed the review process and instructed staff to find, quote, a legally sound basis to say yes to the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Was the Prime Minister aware that members of his government pressured officials to rush the review and produce a positive result for Kinder Morgan.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we still have a political situation in which two of the parties in this House think there's a choice to be made between either the environment or the economy. We got elected on a commitment to both grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time, because quite frankly, 10 years of the previous government not protecting the environment actually left us with the lowest economic growth rate since the depths of the Great Depression. So we're moving forward on both building pipelines and bringing in protections for the environment at the same time. It's what Canadians expect of this government, and it's what we're delivering.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know if the Prime Minister understood the question. Senior officials of his government said publicly that the government had to find a way to accelerate the process and to find legal ways of approving it. The Prime Minister had promised a new process for environmental assessment. He said that it would be more rigorous, but it's become clear that Kinder Morgan was fast-tracked. It's as though the CEO of Kinder Morgan had a direct line to the Minister of Natural Resources. How can the Prime Minister keep saying that this is a balanced process when it's increasingly clear that the game was rigged from the start? Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what's interesting about the NDP is that the NDP and their leader can't even agree on this project. On the one hand, their leader said that he might approve the project or agree with it, but on the other hand, the honourable member says that his party could never accept it. We made a decision that is in the national interest, and we have a plan, a world-class plan to protect the oceans, because we know that the environment and the economy go hand in hand. While the NDP is trying to find its position, we are taking action in the interest of Canada. The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, for over a year, we've been calling on the government to suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement so that asylum seekers can go to official border crossing points, which would improve the safety of both asylum seekers and of Canadians. The government needs to present a concrete plan to manage the situation, and suspending this agreement needs to be part of such a plan in order for it to be effective. Will the government finally suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement? Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to having a rigorous asylum-seeking system while protecting the integrity of our borders and of our immigration system. We've invested $173 million, including $64 million, to accelerate the processing of asylum seekers' applications. For work permits, delays have gone down from 3 months to 3 weeks, and we are introducing new measures to deal with labor shortages. What did the Conservatives do? Cut investments and create unnecessarily long delays.
Over East.
Border communities are bracing for another spike in irregular crossings. We know what the Conservative plan is: follow Trump by shutting down the border and turn away refugees. But we haven't seen any plan from this government. People are risking life and limb to cross the border, but the Prime Minister has refused to suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement. And we've seen troubling comments from the Prime Minister suggesting that some migrants are trying to game the system. So my question to the Prime Minister is, will he stop trying to look like a global humanitarian and just act like one?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party has continued to play its games of division, and I'm worried that the NDP might actually be trying to stoke fears as well. The fact is, we have a rigorous immigration system that we are able to apply. We are ensuring the security of Canadians with our controls at the borders and between borders through the work the RCMP is doing. Canadians can have confidence in the capacity both of our immigration system, of our border agents and security services to ensure the safety of Canada and its communities while remaining open.
The Honourable Member. The Honourable Member for Richmond North Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, it's been weeks and months and nothing has changed. The number of people crossing the border illegally keeps going up, as does the cost of dealing with them. Meanwhile, immigrants and refugees who follow the rules all across the country have been waiting in line for months. Some of them have even been waiting for years. So it's critical that the Prime Minister show Canadians concrete solutions to fight this problem, a problem which has existed for over a year now. What does the Prime Minister plan to do to solve this problem, which he amplified by his actions in January 2017? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, our position is clear. We will always be a welcoming country, but we also have put rules in place concerning eligibility. Anyone crossing the border in an irregular fashion will be detained and subjected to criminal checks. As many experts have said recently, I would ask my colleague from the opposition to choose his words carefully, because misinformation and incendiary rhetoric will only fan the flames of fear. The Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Well, I'd like to tell the Minister that I found some of those words from the government's website, from the Department of Immigration. Now, the burden we are putting on our border crossing staff in Quebec is untenable. And their work is nowhere close to finished, because soon they will be facing nearly 400 people every day crossing into Canada. And they're doing so illegally, as it says on the Department of Immigration's website. We saw this problem last year and we see it again now, and it's going to continue. So what will the Prime Minister do to make the rules clear? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, as Mr. Langlois, the director of the International Security Center at Laval University, said, the rhetoric of political parties is legitimizing the myth that immigrants are treated better than Canadians. And he said, I think that this is dangerous. We are normalizing that attitude, an attitude that says that immigrants are suspect, and that it's not a good idea to have a lot of immigrants arriving quickly in Quebec. End of quote. So I would encourage my colleague across the way to choose his words carefully.
Calgary Nose Hill.
This is bananas, Mr. Speaker. All that we're doing here is standing up and asking the Prime Minister to run a planned, orderly and safe immigration system.
Exactly.
Over 50,000 people are projected to illegally enter the country this year. That is not planned, that is not safe, and that is not orderly, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this issue and has only made the problem worse. So frankly, this begs the question. Does the Prime Minister think it's wrong to illegally enter the country? And if so, can he unequivocally state so here today?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
If the member opposite is calling for Canada to withdraw from its international obligations with respect to refugees, she should come out and say it instead of dancing around the bush. Secondly, we are making the necessary investments. When that party was in power, they were against making investments to protect vulnerable people. They were against making investments to secure our border. They were against making investments to fast-track refugee processes. When we came and decided to make those investments, they voted against it. They voted against additional resources for border security. They voted against additional resources for refugee processing. And finally, they voted...
Order. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister can't even bring himself to utter the words, it is wrong to illegally enter the country. So if he can't even do that, how can anybody trust him to put forward a plan that is going to maintain Canada's immigration system? That is all we are asking to do today with our opposition motion, is have a safe, orderly, planned immigration system. So I'm going to ask him a very simple question, which I think would fix this problem. Will the Liberals designate the entire Canadian-U.S. border as a technical official point of entry for the purpose of enforcing the Safe Third Country Agreement?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Speaker, the proposals emanating from that party are simply not credible. They have at times called for the Canadian military to be deployed at the border. Now they're calling for the entire border to be made an official port of entry, and they haven't presented a plan to ensure that there will be adequate resources for that process. We are responsibly dealing with this issue, making the necessary investments, putting in place money for more border security operations and faster processing of refugee claims. But the fact of the matter is they can run from their record, Mr. Speaker, but they cannot hide.
Order. There's far too much noise. Order. We need to hear the questions as well as the answers.
The Honourable Member for Chalabourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister seems unable to deal with the crisis created by the thousands of illegal border crossings in Quebec. By not acting, he is endangering Canadian safety and undermining the immigration agreement between Canada and Quebec. And law-abiding immigrants are losing out to those who don't respect our laws. Will the Prime Minister finally submit a plan to restore order at the border? Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, as the director of the Centre for Preventing Radicalization, it is completely irresponsible to make Quebecers believe that they are threatened by a huge influx of immigrants. Mr. Speaker, a rigorous process is in place to ensure the protection of people fleeing persecution and to ensure that those who abuse our system are sent back. The Honourable Member for Chalabourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. It's strange, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is taking academics' comments, but I've heard from people on the ground, and they are telling me that the time for security verifications at the border has been significantly reduced, apparently to hide the backlog in processing these files. This government's priority should be protecting the safety of Canadians, not giving first-class service to those who break the rules. If the government doesn't know who's entering in the country, how can they ensure the safety of Canadians? Why is the Prime Minister hiding the truth from Canadians? Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, once again, I would recommend that my colleague choose his words carefully, because misinformation and incendiary rhetoric only fan the flames of fear and division. We have a system here in Canada for refugees, and we are proud of that system. It has very high eligibility criteria, which we respect. And every time someone crosses the border irregularly, we subject those people to verifications.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, Parliament received yet another audit decrying failed leadership in delivering on Canada's 2020 biodiversity targets and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The Commissioner of Environment Audit is deeply critical of this government's fixation on holding meetings, finding that they're basically all talk and no action. She reports 43% decline in threatened mammals, including iconic caribou, and 44% decline in bird life. When will this government set aside the rhetoric and start taking action to protect threatened species and ensure sustainability?
The Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite must have been very pleased to see the budget. Historic $1.3 billion to invest in protecting biodiversity, protecting species at risk. We are absolutely committed to meeting our international targets. We met our marine targets of 7% this year, last year. We're continued to working forward. We're working with the provinces and territories. I encourage the member opposite to work with us, to work with provinces and territories so that we can protect more of our land in the marine area.
Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. When it comes to building Trans Mountain, Kinder Morgan, the Prime Minister is willing to do anything, impose his will on the provinces, and even break his promise to set up a credible environmental assessment process, because it's in the national interest. Meanwhile, the Environment Commissioner has said that the Liberal government spends more time planning meetings than taking concrete steps to protect our biodiversity. Can the Prime Minister explain why taking steps to protect our biodiversity isn't part of the national interest? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to be able to give the same answer in French. Our government has announced $1.3 billion in investments to protect biodiversity, to protect fauna. This is a historic investment. We already met our target for 2017 when it comes to protecting marine areas. And we are doing this because we know that we have a duty to protect our environment. That is what Canadians want. That's what we're going to do. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Parliamentary Budget Office tabled a report with pros and cons. The pro is that there's $8 billion more than planned under this government. And the con is that there's $10 billion less in the economy thanks to the carbon tax. Why is the government setting up a situation where the Canadian economy will lose $10 billion a year? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, in 2015, Canadians made a choice. They chose a government that knows that we need to protect our environment and fight climate change. And we can do that while growing the economy. So I'm confused. Putting a price on carbon is a project that Conservatives should support. It puts a price on something that people consider bad, which is greenhouse gas emissions. And it also gives us an opportunity to invest in green growth. Canadians want us to grow the economy. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, what they're attacking is taxpayers' wallets. $10 billion less in the economy. The question is an economic one. It's for the Minister of Finance. The Parliamentary Budget Officer said yesterday that because of the tax, the Canadian economy will be facing headwinds. So, can the Minister of Finance stand up and defend Canada's economy? The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Monsieur le Président, alors je ne sais pas si vous avez une...
Order. Order.
Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to stand up and talk about this because the economy and the environment go hand in hand. So I have a question for the party opposite. Do they know that climate change is real? Do they recognize that there is a price to floods and forest fires? Or to the fact that the Arctic isn't there anymore? I don't know. We have a plan, though. We have a plan to grow the economy, as the Minister of Finance did. We are creating good jobs, and we are growing our economy.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
My question is for the Finance Minister, and it's about the 200 pages in his budget that relate to the carbon tax and the carbon tax cover-up. His government is asking Parliament to empower him to impose this tax without telling Canadians what it will cost them. It's kind of like a big blank check from Canadian taxpayers. So my question is this. In the Finance Minister's budget, how much will the carbon tax cost the average family?
Honourable Minister of Finance.
I'm delighted to respond to the question from the member for Carleton and to tell him and his colleagues that, in fact, we will continue to make investments that will grow our economy. What I think Canadians can see is that the program that our government has put forward has had a really important and long-term impact on Canadians, taking our situation so that we're in a much faster growth situation, many, many more jobs. And the next measures we're taking are going to make sure that for the very long term, that our environment is strong because we're going to price carbon, ensuring that we have a long-term approach to the environment that continues with great jobs for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
All right. We're making some progress. We actually got the right minister to stand up this time. unfortunately, he said that he's making investments to grow the economy while the PBO, Parliamentary Budget Officer, says that his carbon tax will actually shrink the economy by $10 billion. $10 billion is one number we do know, but we don't yet know how much this carbon tax will cost the average Canadian family. So maybe the Finance Minister will tell us right now.
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell this House is that the idea that we're making progress, an idea acknowledged by the member from Carleton.
Order. The honourable member for Carleton. Order. Just asked the Minister of Finance to tell the House something. I would ask members to let the Minister of Finance say what he has to say, and then this side will have a turn in future when it gets to be their turn again. But each side has their turn, and we listen. Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, as a member of Carleton, acknowledge we're making progress. And I think the kind of progress that we're seeing in this country is truly astonishing. We've taken an economy that was moribund from the previous government, low, stubborn unemployment, growth rates that were very, very challenging, and we've turned it around. We find ourselves in a much better situation across the country. More jobs, better economy. We'll keep on this plan, Mr. Speaker.
I get the impression the honourable member for Edmonton West did not hear what I said a moment ago, and some others as well. I'm serious. I ask members not to interrupt when someone else is speaking. The honourable member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday a media report revealed that there are almost 3,500 federal employees who work on messaging for this Liberal government, 10 times the number of reporters on the Hill. You'd think with so many people, this government would be more transparent. But access to information requests about important matters of public interest take months, often years, to be processed, and what you get is often so blacked out as to be useless. Will the government acknowledge the mess they've created and truly modernize rather than gutting the Access to Information Act?
President of the Treasury Board.
Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for his question. After 34 years, Mr. Speaker, we are the first Canadian government to act to modernize and strengthen the Access to Information Act. It's important to recognize, Mr. Speaker, that we are the first government to actually give the Commissioner order-making power and to apply the Access to Information Act to ministers' offices, to the Prime Minister's offices, in fact, to 240 government organizations. And furthermore, we're going to ensure that it never becomes out of date again with a mandatory review every 5 years, Mr. Speaker. We are an open and transparent government.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, it's been 5 months since the CBC Radio-Canada reported on how easy it is to hack a cell phone, track movement, and listen in on conversations. And now telcos and the Public Safety Minister are refusing to answer questions about protecting Canadians' privacy, choosing instead to meet behind doors, behind closed doors. What does the government have to hide? Why isn't the minister reassuring Canadians publicly? The Honourable Minister.
Security of our nation and of our citizens, and takes seriously the threat to the privacy of Canadians. The Communication Security Establishment, in coordination with its partners, have been actively working with Canada's telecom industry and critical infrastructure operators to develop best practices, advice, and guidance that can help mitigate the risks associated with the SS7. That is why we propose to commit $55 million over 5 years for the creation of a new Canadian Centre of Cybersecurity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Député d'Edmonton Centre.
Honourable member for Edmonton Centre.
The government has been a strong supporter of the province of Alberta and of Albertans since taking office. This has been true on extending EI benefits, on providing fiscal stabilizations, and especially true on federal infrastructure investments. The evidence is clear. We have invested more than 150 projects, including the long-awaited upgrade to the Yellowhead Freeway, and we are not stopping there. Can the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities update this House on the latest infrastructure investments our government is making in the great province of Alberta?
Order. Members aren't always going to like what they hear, but they're required not to interrupt. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan should know that he shouldn't be talking throughout the time when someone else is asking or answering a question or otherwise speaking in the House. The Honourable Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member from Edmonton Centre for his continued advocacy on behalf of Albertans. We were both proud to announce that our government will invest more than $3.4 billion in Alberta to build better public transit system, build recreational, cultural facilities, provide clean drinking water to communities, and a dedicated funding for small communities. These investments, along with other investments, will continue to grow Alberta's economy and create middle-class jobs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, 99% of Canada's oil exports go to the U.S., but the U.S. is ramping up their domestic production and will supply 80% of growing global oil demand in the next 5 years. The Liberals are destroying Canada's competitiveness. A major midstream operator, Keyera, warns, quote, Canada is not looked upon as a good place to invest when it comes to oil and gas.
That's right.
U.S. investors are negative about Canada. The U.S. environment is quite positive. When will the Liberals stop helping the United States steal Canadian jobs, innovation, and investment?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the member opposite agrees with us that having 99% of our export of oil and gas go to one country, the United States, isn't a very good idea, which is why we want to expand our export markets. It's too bad that in 10 years of government, they didn't do that. They didn't build 1 kilometer of pipeline to access export markets. So, in a way, the honourable member is helping us make the argument that we need to do exactly that to get a better price for our oil, to create good jobs for Canadians, and that's what we intend to do.
The honourable member for Lakeland.
They vetoed, of course, the only new opportunity to Tidewater, and they risked the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of Canadians. Next year, the Bank of Canada says new energy investment in Canada will drop to zero. 97% of Canada's oil is in the oil sands, but the Prime Minister keeps telling the world he wants to phase it out. Every one oil sands job creates 2.5 jobs in the rest of Canada. But since 2015, over 55,000 oil sands workers lost their jobs. More than twice the people lost their jobs in oil and gas across Canada, not including contractors. When will the Prime Minister actually champion energy investment in Canada and jobs for Canadians?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Speaker, I'm sure the member is pleased as we are that there have been 50,000 new jobs created in Alberta. I'm sure that the member opposite is also very pleased, because she's an Albertan, to know that Alberta is actually going to lead the country in growth of GDP. It is actually members on this side of the House who continue to be optimistic and bullish about the growth of the Western Canadian economy, and all they do is say doom and gloom. We believe in entrepreneurship and innovation and the spirit of the people of Alberta.
Honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock.
Mr. Speaker, Jocelyn Branford, founder of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Ontario, is troubled that another failed energy project would hurt Ontario's manufacturers. 300 families in Peterborough understand that warning all too well when they lost their jobs at General Electric when this Prime Minister allowed Energy East to fail. When will the Prime Minister realize that his plan to phase out Canada's energy sector will be catastrophic for jobs right across this country?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, the member knows that the proponent backed out of Energy East because the price of oil had tanked and because there had been no pipelines approved. Well, since then, 3 pipelines were approved. So it's pretty clear that business conditions have changed, and it's also very clear that this government understands very well that we want to move our resources to market sustainably. We understand that in 2018, the economy and the environment go hand in hand.
The honourable member for Banff-Airdrie.
Well, the Liberals like to say that the environment and the economy go hand in hand, but it turns out they don't know how to manage either of them. The Prime Minister wants to phase out Alberta's energy sector, and he's put in place a carbon tax that will knock $10 billion off Canada's GDP while doing absolutely nothing to reduce emissions. And they've purposely created regulatory uncertainty, killing projects like Energy East and Northern Gateway. So why are the Liberals so dead set against the oil and gas industry and all the jobs that come with it, while also doing absolutely nothing to help the environment?
The The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, we understand the environment and the economy go together. Under the previous government, they couldn't get any pipelines built. We are working very hard. We have approved major projects. At the same time, we know we're in a transition to a cleaner economy. That's a $30 trillion opportunity. Do you want to turn that down, or do you want to take advantage of it? We want to take advantage of it. I was in New York where I saw Alberta companies who were shortlisted for the Carbon X Prize. Yes, you should be impressed, because that's pretty amazing. This is where the future is going. Environment and the economy get to go together. Get with the program. Good for you.
The Honourable Member for St. Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals promised to review EI healthcare benefits. The promise was made in 2016. 2 years later, still waiting. Recently, a single mom with cancer had to go back to work despite her poor health after her 15 weeks of benefits were up. That's unacceptable. My question is for all those who have to go back to work instead of taking the time to get well. When is the government going to do something about these benefits, the EI healthcare benefits? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for her question and her interest in this significant matter. I know that conditions can be very hard for families, parents, and children, and we care about that. We also have made significant investments in service quality and benefits to Canadians who are going through hardship. Mr. Speaker, because it's important to us and to them too, we are going to continue working very hard to achieve the goal of greater compassion and greater support. Thank you.
18,000 low-income seniors, largely from Atlantic Canada, received their notices and filed their taxes on time last year. And then their desperately needed GIS checks were suspended. Mr. Speaker, when you have very little, this money can make the difference between paying your rent and being out on the street. A place no Canadian should ever be, especially when it is a CRA error. When will this government automatically enroll all low-income seniors for GIS so this never happens again?
Mr. Speaker, our government is improving the agency's services to enable Canadians to file returns more easily and get the benefits they're entitled to. Anyone who is not receiving benefits is of concern to our government. That is why we have taken steps to ensure that service to Canadians is improved, and I would invite anyone who's not getting their GIS to contact the agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Arnie Lampton.
Mr. Speaker, the Justice Minister has stated that she's open to decriminalizing all drugs. If it's not bad enough that thousands of Canadians are dying from the opioid crisis, which this Liberal government is not adequately addressing, now they want to add crack and heroin to the mix. There's not enough treatment centres as it is. Parents across the country deserve to know if the Prime Minister is serious about this absurd idea.
Mr. Speaker, we are in a national public health crisis when it comes to the opioid crisis, and our government is treating this as a public health issue, not as a criminal one. We understand that stigma and barriers to treatment need to be reduced, and our government has taken initiatives to address this matter. While decriminalization would not ensure quality control for drugs, we have made it easier for health professionals to provide access to opioid substitution therapies and supported the Good Samaritan Act. Through Budget 2018, investments of $231 million has been made, and we will continue to develop innovative approaches to turn this tide on this national public health crisis. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the cat got out of the bag at the Liberal convention on the weekend. Marijuana hasn't even been legalized yet, and now the Liberals want to open up to cocaine, crack, and heroin. We already know the Minister of Labour and member for Beaches East York wanted to decriminalise all drugs, but now it's the official Liberal Party position. And yet Health Canada indicates these drugs are lethal. My question is simple. What kind of bad trip are the Liberals looking for? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We're dealing with a national crisis. It's a public health crisis. And our government is determined to deal with the opioid crisis as a health issue, not a criminal issue. Stigma and obstacles to treatment have to be reduced, and we've undertaken a number of initiatives in that regard. And decriminalization will not guarantee drug quality, but we have provided professionals with access to opioid substitution therapies, and we will continue to take action to help avoid overdoses. Thank you.
Well, it looks like Liberals are open to decriminalizing heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, and other illicit drugs. Legalizing marijuana hasn't even passed. The Liberal plan to deal with the opioid crisis isn't working, yet here they are, the Justice Minister and this Prime Minister, unveiling their next big idea, being open to decriminalizing illegal drugs. Mr. Speaker, I ask the Justice Minister once again, is this really a path we want Canada to go down? And when did she get the mandate from Canadians to make illegal drugs legal?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Harper Conservatives, our government is treating this as a public health approach. Our government is committed to reducing necessary regulatory barriers to treatment. We are not looking to decriminalize or legalize any drugs aside from cannabis, and we will await further results about the impact of its legalization. With decriminalization, there would still be a risk of contamination.
Sorry, I have to ask the honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London, and others to wait their turn. Each side gets their turn, and we listen together whether we like what they say or not, and we get the turn when, in fact, the microphone is on and people can hear us back home. So we should each wait our turn, and we should listen to what others have to say, whether we like it or not. The Honourable Minister of Health has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, our government is proud that we're going to be launching a public education campaign to address stigma, reduce barriers for those seeking treatment, and we will continue to develop innovative approaches to turn this tide on the national public health crisis that our country is facing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Oakville North Burlington.
Mr. Speaker, our government has doubled the number of jobs for young Canadians through the Canada Summer Jobs Program, making it our priority to ensure young people have the skills they need to succeed. In my riding, I have heard firsthand the positive impact of this program for youth and employers like the Oakville Soccer Club, Old World Stone, and St. Luke's Anglican Church. It helps youth save money for school, gain valuable skills, and contribute to their communities. Can the Minister update this House on Canada Summer Jobs 2018?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Oakville, North Burlington, for her question and her advocacy for young people across Canada. A strong middle class and a growing economy depend on young Canadians getting the skills and experience that they need to succeed, and that's why our government has doubled the Canada Summer Jobs Program, something the previous government wouldn't do. In fact, we have created meaningful paid work experience for almost 70,000 students this year, and today we launched the hiring season for Canada Summer Jobs employers, meaning that employers across the country are now ready to hire young people. So I encourage young people to apply. We're looking forward to...
The Honourable Member for York to Melville has been heckling both the question and the answer. I'd ask her not to do that, not to interrupt. We wait our turn to speak. The Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Smilkameen Nicola, it's his turn.
Mr. Speaker, small businesses across Canada, including Innovate from Kelowna, have joined together to launch a campaign called Let Me Compete to fight the Liberals' latest attack on small businesses. Under new printer procurement rules, these Liberals are shutting out small and medium-sized bidders in favor of the largest suppliers. Now, these businesses employ thousands of Canadians, and now those jobs are at risk. Now, less competition also means higher prices for taxpayer. Mr. Speaker, why are the Liberals always attacking Canadian small business? Why not let them compete?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Public Service.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, unlike the previous government, we're committed to a modern, sophisticated procurement program, one that delivers results and delivers lower costs for taxpayers. We are delivering a modern, secure, and reliable platform for the digital delivery of programs and services to Canadians. The scale, scope, and complexity of the modernization that Shared Services Canada is implementing is unprecedented, and after extensive industry engagement, we're undertaking a fair, open, transparent, and competitive procurement for office equipment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
In a scathing report, the Environment Commissioner confirmed what we've been saying for years. The aquaculture industry is exposing wild salmon to disease and harmful pesticides. In fairness, Mr. Speaker, how would the Liberals know? They're not even monitoring the health of wild salmon. The minister claims to be licensing salmon farms based on, quote, scientific evidence, but clearly he's not. Further, the report confirms they place farmed over wild salmon every time. When will the minister commit to a just transition to safe, land-based, closed containment?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, we want to thank the Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development for her report. I had the chance to meet her yesterday, discuss the recommendations. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the government has accepted all of her recommendations. In fact, a number of the things that she has suggested are already underway because of our government's historic investments in science, in marine protection, in ocean protection. For example, we're completing key disease risk assessments for these fish. We're clarifying the roles and responsibilities for managing emerging diseases. We're communicating more effectively the precautionary approach. And Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do a lot more on this important issue.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, in my riding, a number of constituents work directly or indirectly for the aerospace industry. There are also some businesses and families with close ties to the industry. There are also several institutions and organizations that do R&D for the aerospace industry. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Can he explain what steps the government is taking to ensure the continued growth of our aerospace industry? The Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. He's right. The aerospace industry is very important to Canada, and that is why we have invested around $50 million.
Aerospace consortium led by Bell Helicopter. And this will help create 300 good quality middle class jobs. It'll add an additional $178 million to our GDP. And it reaffirms our commitment to the aerospace sector, Mr. Speaker. And once again, I'd like to thank the member for his advocacy and hard work on this very important issue.
The honourable member for North Okanagan-Shuswap.
Mr. Speaker, the Fisheries Minister claims that he stands with the people of Grand Bank. Now that's a whale of a tale if I've ever heard one. The minister is the one killing jobs in Grand Bank, taking away their Arctic surf clam quota and giving it to his Liberal buddies. The people of Grand Bank have launched grandbankplan.ca to fight for their jobs because MPs in Newfoundland and Labrador won't. Will the minister finally put the good people of Grand Bank ahead of his Liberal insiders and support their plan to save Grand Bank jobs?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed, as I said yesterday, to working to help to supporting the hardworking people of Grand Bank. That's why they're so ably represented in this House of Commons by a member of Parliament who's met me on a number of times about initiatives that will increase the work potential, not only for that plant, but for other economic opportunities in Grand Bank. And Mr. Speaker, you'll forgive me for being somewhat surprised by the feigned indignation from the Conservative Party, who had a process 3 years ago to bring a new entrant into this important fishery, and at that time, they didn't worry about the people of Grand Bank. We worry about the people of Grand Bank, and we'll support them.
The honourable member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, in Quebec, as of April 17th, 15,000 asylum seekers are waiting for Ottawa to process their cases. We don't know if they'll be accepted or not, but we do know they'll need housing, health care, work, and school for the kids. What has the minister done since last Wednesday night to expedite the processing of this backlog? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, as you know, we have put in place a working group. We did so last summer to tackle this important issue, and I'm proud of the fact that the federal level and the provincial level, including Quebec and Ontario, have been working very harmoniously together. And we met last Wednesday and made a number of announcements dealing with the issues and challenges we're facing. This is teamwork between the provinces and the federal government, and that's a great example of how a country should work. The honourable member for Montcalm. Talk, talk, talk. That's all the Liberals do, blah, blah, blah. Meetings and talk, no concrete action. The migrant crisis is a humanitarian crisis. 200 asylum seekers a day, 400 this summer. And what do the ministers do? They just keep on talking. Why isn't the minister hiring more people to process these claims? It's simple. The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, the answer is simple too. We've invested $173 million in budget 2018. $74 million is earmarked for the Immigration and Refugee Board to expedite processing. I hope that's an adequate answer for my colleague.
I'd like to draw the member's attention to the presence in the gallery of His Excellency Alassane Bala Sekonde, Speaker of the National Assembly of Burkina Faso.
Ordre du jour.
Orders of the day. Government's order. Resuming debate on the motion of Ms. Rempel on illegal border crossings.